Hi everyone, it's Hans here, the founder of Cappuccino, and welcome back for Series 3 of Flat Whites and Insights, sponsored by SPA Advisory. We're here for some open, honest and vulnerable conversations held over a beautiful cup of coffee, and they're coming from my home, so I'll be providing the flat whites, and my guests, they'll be providing the insights. So grab a coffee for yourselves, take a moment, and I hope you enjoy this latest conversation. Thank you, take care, and enjoy. Robbie, hi.
Hi.
Thanks for taking the time to come over.
Thanks so much for having me. It's great to be here.
Yeah, no, join me on Flat Whites and Insights. And so we met, it was actually at the Football in Berkshire Awards last year. There'll be some people who are listening who are aware of what that is. It's a great event. But for those who don't know who you are, you'd like to give a brief introduction just before we dive in.
Yeah, for sure. I'm Robbie Stelling. I'm a sports journalist, and I spent the first 2.5 years of my career working in Berkshire, covering all sports as well. You know, Berkshire is blessed with having some really top talent in loads of different sporting fields, especially the time that I was there. Football is my one true love, I have to say. So we covered some great football teams, Hungerford Town foremost amongst them, who we chatted about at the Football in Berkshire Awards, Thatcham Town, Newbury, and loads of other teams as well. But obviously horse racing is massive in Berkshire. So I was really lucky in terms of the access that we got to the top trainers was absolutely incredible. Jumps and flat, Nicky Henderson, Andrew Balding, just fantastic people. Which was great. Cricket as well. I even ended up playing cricket for the Hungerford second team. I'm not sure they really thanked me. They were too thankful once they saw me play. But I ended up, I turned up, and the first game that I played, I said, I haven't played cricket for about 15 years, really, 10, 15 years since my school days. And they said, great, you can open the batting. So that was really interesting. And Lauren Bell, the England international cricketer, she was born and raised in Berkshire, played cricket, came through the ranks, actually, would you believe that, Hungerford. So that was great. She was a fantastic to deal with. Izzy Fry, a 5,000 metre runner, and Luke Humphreys, who we were lucky enough to cover him at the time that he won the World Championships. I think probably us in Newbury and maybe the broader Berkshire area were just about the only people outside of Luke's family that was supporting him in that final, given that it was against Luke Littler and the teenage sensation and everything. Again, I couldn't speak highly enough of Luke Humphreys. Fantastic guy. And I had a wonderful time working in Berkshire. Met so many great people, and the Football in Berkshire Awards was a fantastic way to do that. It's a really nice way to bring people together, isn't it? And now I'm off, I've had quite a change of scene. So I've been... Last 4 or 5 months, I've been up in the northeast covering the mighty Hartlepool United. Despite the southern accent, it often confuses people, and it certainly throws people up there. But that is, through my dad's side, that's my... I'm a long-suffering Hartlepool United fan.
Bit of a homecoming.
Yes,
to go back up there too. A spiritual home, should we say?
Spiritual home. I think if you ask the locals, if I was coming home to Hartlepool, I don't think they would be too keen on that idea. I think they hear the southern accent and they tend to take a step back and a draw of breath in horror. But it's been fantastic. I was just talking to you before we came on. Working with the previous manager, Kevin Phillips, England international, Premier League legend, was fantastic to deal with. The new manager, Darren Sarley, is very different in terms of his profile. He played non-league football through his whole career. He went as high as Conference South as it was then. Worked in a number of different academy jobs. Worked very closely with the late, great Glenn Roeder at Stevenage, which was his first managerial job, and now is managing at National League level, and hopefully it's going to steer Hartlepool to promotion, but we'll see.
Amazing. So I think even just in that introduction there, you can see your passion for the sport and sport in general. We'll probably end up speaking about football most, because that again is my sport. That is the one that I now work in full time with Bucks and Bucks FA, but also volunteer at Didcot Town, which you were mentioning was just around the corner really.
Yeah, it certainly is.
So it's perfect, and I am a Wycombe fan, we could also say, long-suffering. I remember a few games against Hartlepool over the years, Wycombe and Hartlepool.
Yeah, I went to watch...
a few of those over the years.
I think I went to watch Wycombe quite comprehensively beat Hartlepool. Lucky enough to know Gareth Ainsworth a bit, actually.
Yes,
We might talk briefly. We mentioned about.
Because he is local as well to the area.
Exactly. Yeah, we might talk briefly about my dad, who's a sports journalist as well. Mm-hmm. But he does he has done a number of charity walks for prostate cancer.
Yeah, I think there was once walking from Wembley to Adams Park.
Yes, and the welcome that we were given at Wickham, I think it was. They must have done 40, 50 odd walking marathons now.
Yeah.
And I think Dad actually said at the time it was the best welcome he'd ever had. And Gareth Ainsworth, who was QPR manager at the time, he'd been dropping his daughter off at university, but he rushed back, parked his car, met us as we were on the walk so that he could complete the final 13 miles.
I think that is one thing with Gareth Ainsworth. Obviously his football style was a bit different.
Yeah.
You know, it was a bit, should we say Route 1, it was direct.
Yeah.
But again, from being a Wycombe Wanderers fan and was a season ticket holder for a few years and got to know Ainsworth. Ainsworth would have so much time for any fans, any volunteers.
Just a great guy.
Just a great guy, and I think it's funny, he was on Sky Sports, I believe, doing commentary on the semi-final.
Yeah.
England were playing Holland. Obviously, most people probably were watching the game.
Yes.
But just seeing his reaction when Ollie Watkins scored that goal, and that it just is Gareth Ainsworth, and just I can see why he was such a motivator for the Wycombe team. And he punched way above his weight and getting Wycombe to the championship.
And I think maybe the football, to an extent, he might say, that was his brand of football, wasn't it? That's the sort of brand that he's renowned with. But you have to live within your means to an extent. And at QPR 100%. As well, I think he sort of inherited a QPR squad where off-field it wasn't quite perfect, but he's such a lovely, warm, welcoming man. And he's also such a great character as well. He is quite unique in terms of the football manager with the long hair.
Front man of a band as well.
And exactly.
I think I can't imagine many players who wouldn't want to play for him once you get in that side in the main event.
And supporters love it as well.
Yeah, Wycombe fans loved him. Obviously, we're doing well now with Matt Bloomfield and another Wycombe legend who played for ages.
Yeah,
but it's people like that, and yes, that's at Football League level. But I mean, I'm sure from your time at Hungerford or from time now at Hartlepool, it's that the people do make football.
Yes,
and I think that is something I would say. And I think perfect example, Gareth Southgate.
Yeah,
another Gareth who just, as we're recording this today, has announced that he is stepping back. And again, like, people might not see his style as the way we should play, and I think he was what was needed when he came in and gave that stability, because the situation that we were in 2016 was almost laughable when you think back to then to now.
Yeah.
But no one can question the man he is, and all the players talk about loving playing for him, and so I think it's
great, a great man, and I think also a great man manager. I think that was probably his biggest strength.
Yeah.
In terms of leading the England squad to so much success. And I know people might say, well, they haven't won a trophy at the end of it.
Yeah.
And a lot of people will perhaps consider that a failure. And I understand the thinking there, but you've only got to look at the history, the 20 or 30 years pre-Southgate. And obviously the team were not nearly as successful, as it were. Of course, Southgate has inherited a fantastic crop of players. But you look at someone like Fabio Capello or Sven-Goran Eriksson, they had a fantastic crop of players as well. They had
the golden generation.
Exactly, they had the golden generation. But I think where they struggled and Southgate excelled is just the management of the personalities within the group. It always felt like such a happy camp.
Yeah. It looks like they want to play for England again. That's the difference.
Exactly, I think he certainly, maybe this tournament, the Euros, it's just been, it felt like that weight of expectation was a little bit heavier, but previously there was a little bit more freedom, which I think we probably hadn't seen as England fans for some time. And Southgate, as a man, I think contributed to that massively. Obviously, we don't know what it was like in the dressing room, but it certainly seems like it was a happy place. He balanced the personalities. Obviously, it wasn't without occasional moments of friction. Obviously, Ben White, I think, is the one that really comes to mind. They've obviously had a falling out again. We don't know quite what's happened there, but that's inevitable. I think when you lead a country for 8 years, and there's always going to be big egos because these guys are the creme de la creme. They're at the peak of their powers.
And like people say, that is the toughest job. But I think, and then we were just saying before we kind of hit record, that it's nice, and I think the contract was there for the FA. I think they really knew. I think Mark Billingham and the FA, obviously, I wouldn't say I know them that well, but from being within the FA network and being at events with them and things. But just with the FA, I think they knew probably that he was not going to do it. But I like the fact that it was on his terms.
I think
that's the respect that
he earned the right.
Yeah,
he earned the right to do
it was
that.
on his terms, and I don't blame him. I mean, my platform, I talk about mental health a little bit. And stuff,
Yeah.
and I think after 8 years in that job, and you could see, particularly when the fans were maybe like, say, throwing the cups or this tournament, it really seemed to get to him. And I think it was probably midway through this tournament he'd made his mind up, I think, regardless of the result.
Yeah,
Whether
I think
whether
so.
we won on Sunday. But I think, yeah, so we've dived into chat about management football,
Yeah.
which is great. Obviously, I could talk about this stuff all day, but
Of course, yeah.
we're here on this podcast to learn a bit more about yourself.
Yes.
So one thing you did mention as well is your dad's side, Hartlepool. There
Yes.
might be some people connecting some dots. Stelling is the surname, Hartlepool is the club.
Yes.
Probably similar to myself when we were at the Football in Berkshire Awards.
Yeah.
But something I did do, and I think I made the point of is I didn't want to ask, when I first met you, because I can imagine you maybe have had that a lot growing up. So it'd be interesting I wanted to just wait, and then I think at one point it came out and you mentioned your dad, and so we then had a conversation. But what's it like, I guess, growing up as the son of pretty much the voice of football to a lot of people?
Well, yeah, it's such an interesting one. I pretty much. So Dad Jeff he hosted Soccer Saturday, the sort of football panel show.
Yeah.
Actually, he hosted it pretty much from a couple of years before I was born until last year, 18 months ago.
Yeah.
So in many ways, actually, when I grew up, that was just sort of the normal way of things. That was just his job, and so it always felt completely normal. And obviously, as you start to get older, you start to appreciate it a bit more. And myself, I've got a younger brother as well. We're both avid football fans.
Yeah.
So naturally, we got into watching the show and things like that. It was amazing, honestly. Super proud of him. He had a great career in football. He's still been doing radio. But I think one of the really nice things is whenever you do mention it, and sometimes I'm a bit reticent about bringing it up, especially working in sports journalism.
Yeah.
Now, and maybe even more so at Hartlepool.
At Hartlepool, yeah.
It's kind of finding that balance, because you don't want to go in and it be the first thing you say. I think that would not be attractive. But at the same time, like you say, eventually people might put two and two together.
Yeah.
And the second name is quite distinctive as well. So it kind of comes a time where usually it gets brought up one way or the other.
Yeah.
But the really nice thing is people that you meet are so positive, so nice. Everyone that will come up to him, and we were talking about the charity walk just previously.
Yeah.
Chris Kamara comes on a lot of them, and the two of them are just a fantastic double act, and they have been for so much of their career. The last walk when we finished at Wickham, it was amazing to see the love from everyone.
Yeah.
Chris has had a few problems with his health, and Dad was at the end of his career, and it was sort of overwhelming, the emotions. And again, it might be the last charity walk that they do. I think the people for prostate cancer are often texting me or tweeting me, seeing if I can have a word with him, and there's definitely still life in the old dog yet. So let's see what we can.
Maybe one day you'll have to pass the baton on to yourself. And
Yeah,
keep it going.
I'm not sure that will have quite the same appeal, but we'll have to see. But it's been amazing. I think I'm super proud. That's all I can say. And it's been really interesting moving into the field of journalism. I actually trained as a teacher. I actually trained as a history teacher.
Yeah.
But I'm in journalism now. But it's great to he's a perfect person to learn from. So you couldn't ask for better in that regard.
Yeah,
really.
like in terms of not just as father, but almost like as a mentor. Of being
for sure.
And just would have experienced a lot of those things that maybe you're going through now. And obviously times have changed. Like in terms of the way things are reported. I mean, and now you think everything's social media. We were even saying you were doing a pre-season friendly. I think it was Hartlepool United against FC Hartlepool.
Very confusing.
A lot of trialists, and then obviously nowadays a photo goes up and everyone's on Twitter trying to identify the trialists.
Yes.
And it was probably used to be a lot easier for clubs to keep things kind of under wraps.
Yeah.
I noticed even this during the Euros, when it was kind of talking about formations, this, that, and the other, and I'm like, is this not the kind of thing we want to keep internal?
I know.
'Cause everyone's watching, but no, and like I say, I mean, I certainly have so many memories watching Soccer Saturday growing up. I think the one that sticks in my mind is when Wickham nearly got relegated to the conference. I think it was Wickham, Bristol Rovers, and maybe Northampton were the three clubs. And in the end, Bristol Rovers went down. But I just remember I wasn't there. I didn't travel to Torquay on the day, so I was watching it on Soccer Saturday.
Yeah.
So that's one of my strongest Soccer Saturday memories, definitely.
Yeah,
and,
it's
what a show that was. And actually, I guess for yourself now, even maybe going into the field, you can appreciate how tough that task would have been to keep on top of the thing. And
without a doubt, I mean, one of the things that I get to do now in my new role covering Hartlepool United is I will sometimes do the commentary or the summarising and on the radio, and even just trying to keep up with that, trying to watch the game, write the report, and at least be semi-coherent when you're on the radio. You realise just how difficult it is, because obviously he's got, you know, all the 92 Football League clubs in action, or certainly a fair proportion of them. Scotland as well. It's a lot to keep up with.
Trying to go between reporters and
and try not to get too downbeat about Hartlepool United's miserable. I mean, I remember one of my memories of him actually is the first time Hartlepool were relegated to the National League, which was it must be 6-7 years ago now. And he was on Soccer Saturday. For a lot of the time, it took me a while until I really got into going to Hartlepool, given that geographically it's a long way away. And of course, Dad always works on Saturdays, so we would go to the occasional midweek game. I never really had a choice in supporting Hartlepool. I have to say, we would go to football training, and I've always lived in this area, so you know, Southampton, Winchester kind of way. And we would go to football training, and there'd be the classic Man United, Man City, Chelsea. And I always had the Hartlepool shirt on, and I didn't really have any choice. So I got into it that way. But the first time that we went down, I remember I went to the game. We needed to beat Doncaster, who also needed to win in order to win the league. So there was so much riding on the game. We were 1-0 down, and we came back to 2-1 up. And I didn't see this obviously until later. But Dad had got his Hartlepool shirt on underneath his suit, and it looked like we were going to do it. It looked like we were going to pull off what really would have been a great escape, because I think driving up there, and it's a long old drive, it's 5-6 hours, you've got a lot of time with your thoughts. I gave us no chance, really, but Newport County, apologies to any Newport fans, I always find it difficult to discuss Newport. They scored in the 89th minute,
and
that sent us down, so Dad had to quickly do up his buttons. Compose himself, because he's still got 2.5 hours of the
job.
Exactly. But we were lucky; we got promoted back to the Football League. We're now back in the National League, but we were promoted in 2021, and Dad and I were lucky enough to go to that game together. I mean, I say lucky. He can be quite a difficult man to watch football with, because he wears his heart so much on his sleeve. The playoff semi-final was against Stockport. We were away, and we were sitting there, and it was the back end of COVID, so there were fans allowed back in the stadiums, but it was all segregated. You know, you're sitting a metre apart or whatever. And Dad can't help himself but scream and shout for Hartlepool, because at the time it was only home fans and a few away directors. He's the honorary president there, so he managed to get in, and I managed to sneak in next to him. And he's screaming and shouting, and one of the Stockport fans said, "Stelling, if you don't shut up, I'm going to throw you down those stairs." And of course, 2 minutes later, Hartlepool score the winning goal, and he's given it the big end. So it was we got out alive, and we got promoted. So that was fantastic, because like I say, for so many Saturdays, we weren't able to watch football together. And now that we do watch football together, sometimes I think that's actually a blessing. I don't know how lucky I was, but it's been amazing. So
no, definitely, it's really nice just to hear that, and and obviously he must be quite proud as well to see you now going into that profession.
I think so.
So you mentioned you're a history teacher. You trained as a teacher. So because I was going to ask, was football journalism always the idea? I guess you've always loved the sport, as you said. Maybe you had no choice in that to an extent. But what kind of triggered the change?
Well, it's such an interesting question. I mean, like you said, I've always loved football. I've always loved all sport, but football has always been my passion. And probably I owe a lot of that to Dad, who has lived, worked and breathed football for 30 odd years. I love history as well. That's one of my other passions. I studied for a history degree at university. I played football at university as well. I think one of the things I loved about the history was the writing, actually. I love to write. I love the seminars where we could talk about history. So in many ways, there are some transferable skills in terms of talking about history, writing about history, talking about football, writing about football. It was always a toss-up, I would have said. I went into teaching my brother's actually just qualified as a teacher, so maybe it runs in the family, although I think he can probably claim to have been more successful than I have already. I think, again, it was the time of COVID when I was really figuring out what I wanted to do.
Yeah, yeah.
And I think perhaps football was on the back burner at that time, and teaching was at the forefront of the news.
Yeah, definitely. And were you a teacher at that time? So did you have to do any kind of hybrid teaching or teaching from home?
So again, I trained in sort of towards the tail end of COVID. Okay. So we had masks and we had the sort of glass screen, and obviously that did get relaxed throughout the term. I do remember one frightfully embarrassing moment when it was you're always quite conscious of being a trainee teacher, I think, until you earn your spurs. Yeah, you're always sort of mindful of that. And of course, the students are always mindful of that. They want to push the boundaries.
Yeah, they know, don't they?
Yeah,
They know.
Exactly. So one of my first lessons with one of the new class, I think they were a year 9 class, really great group actually, but naturally you're nervous. It's not an easy thing, I think, to stand up in front of 20, 30 odd people at any time.
Did start teacher training myself actually.
Oh, did you?
Yeah, so chemistry was my subject.
We've got a lot in common there.
Had that kind of standing up in front of a class.
That's half the battle, isn't it?
The behaviour management, the personalities.
Yes,
that's more of it, I think. I think I went into teaching, sorry, just to divert myself, but I went into it because, well, I think, and a lot of people who've listened to the podcast or know me know, I did that chemistry at uni.
Yeah.
Then graduated, got my master's, started a PhD. That didn't work out, and I ended up leaving it because of my mental health.
Yeah.
But actually, that was the best thing that could have happened. And then when I realised, I can't do the PhD, I actually then thought, at that time I thought I loved the subject, so I was like, teaching is the best next thing to do, but I thought everyone, and chemistry particularly is a subject that not everyone loves.
Yeah.
I'm sure there's the same challenge with history, when it's age groups that not everyone's chosen to do it.
Yes.
And then I just wanted to go and talk about the subject, but the biggest challenge is just keeping people engaged.
Yeah, without a doubt.
It is tough. My partner's a teacher. She still is. She's been a teacher for 7 years now.
It's really tough.
So she's definitely not completed it, but can fully say she's a proper teacher, whereas I was definitely not.
It's such an amazing career, isn't it? But I think similar to you, I got to a stage where it was becoming really difficult. For me, it was affecting not just my work life, but I think it was affecting my personal life. I mean, I found it difficult to stand up in front of the students and deliver a lesson. Like I was saying, I remember the new class, we had the perspex screens, and I'm quite, as you can probably tell, I'm quite expressive with my hands when I talk. And we'd been about 5 minutes into the lesson with the new class, and I'm talking about something, delivering with a bit of gusto, as I think. Yeah. And my hand hits the screen cracks, falls down onto the front desk, and it was difficult to recover my composure after that. But it did. I think it got to a point. I mean, it's such a vocational career, and as you'll probably know with your partner, they probably get so much out of it, and good teachers are so important. One of the reasons I wanted to be a teacher is because throughout school, college, university, I was lucky enough to have some amazing teachers, and the memories of them stay with me. Not just necessarily subject specific, sometimes just that bit of advice, that bit of mentorship that they can give you. It's so important, but it just wasn't necessarily for me. I was living in Somerset when I was doing the teaching. Yeah. Beautiful part of the country. Yeah, but I didn't have really roots there necessarily. So I was quite isolated. And I think when you have a bad day, for a lot of people, something that is so beneficial is to just be able to talk about it.
Yeah, to offload on it. Offload.
Exactly.
Talk to someone, you get it off your chest.
It makes such a massive difference. And I didn't really have that. So as I am quite often want to do, I let it sort of bottle up. And that's obviously not really a healthy thing to do. And it just got to a stage, I just changed placement schools, and I just gone into the new placement school, which was going to be my final placement school. And I kind of felt like, well, the end is in sight, but it was change. I don't necessarily adapt that well to change, so I was quite daunted by that. And you're thinking, oh gosh, you've got to go through the whole process of getting to know the students again. Are there going to be any perspex screens for me to break in front of my new class? So at the end, in the end, it just got too much for me.
It was probably that you weren't waking up and looking forward to going in and teaching.
For sure,
which I can relate to as well. Though it got to a point where and that was when I realised I needed to leave. I was like, why am I putting myself through this? Like, I'm not. You should be enjoying it, and enjoying the teaching and the subject. There were little moments that I enjoyed. There was a student that showed particular interest, and we were able to talk about it. But again, I maybe went into it naively thinking, they're all going to love the subject I'm teaching, and
Yeah.
they're all going to be engaged, and they're going to want to learn, and that's just not.
I think
that's
that's
not
the
case.
that's the dream that everyone has, isn't it? I think as a teacher, you think that you can change every student's life,
Yeah.
and you might well be able to do in some subtle ways, but it's in all likelihood there may be 3 or 4 students in
Yeah.
your class that are really gonna respond to you. And it's funny you say that about not looking forward to
Yeah.
going into work and things. Like I really felt that, and then as soon as I made the change, actually, I was really lucky because I landed at the Newbury Weekly News
Yeah.
about 4 to 6 weeks, I think, after I'd made the decision. So from the day of,
So that was quite good.
of
So there
leaving,
wasn't too
so there
long
wasn't a massive time to
gap.
sort of dwell on it or to worry about what the future held. And actually, in the 2.5 years that I spent there, I can barely think of a single bad day.
Yeah.
And that's so important.
And that's it. And it's that when you genuinely mentioned about how maybe when you were studying history, it was the writing and the communicating.
Yes.
You were
Yeah.
able to throw yourself into that, because it is, again, writing an essay or talking about a subject. It's telling a story, and I think that's something I love about journalism. And there's times I think it must be incredible. Some of the things you see, some of the stories, and really getting to know the people.
So many great stories.
Many. And there's probably some stories you can publish, some you can't. I'm sure there's bits
exactly.
and how different it must be maybe at different clubs, and then going up to now. I guess being involved at Hartlepool. There's that. Is it a balance? I don't know. Maybe it's a great thing to be involved working at the club that you grew up supporting. This series of Flat Whites and Insights is sponsored by SP8 Advisory. They specialise in corporate, employment and personal taxation with over 8 years experience between Big Four and industry, and they can support both businesses and individuals with their tax affairs. You've just got to visit spa8advisory.co.uk to find out more, and that link will be in the information for this podcast. I know Stuart really well. He's a close friend and he's very, very good at what he does, so I can only recommend the service. Thanks. Now let's get back to Flat Whites and Insights.
Yeah.
But I guess it also maybe is, again, a bit like when you said with your dad, when he had to button back up his shirt and be carried over the show. There must be moments where maybe there's been a really tough result, or there's been, and then almost the last thing you want to have to do is talk to the manager about it, and it must be difficult when it's
definitely a balancing
tie
act
as well.
Well, exactly, and I think certainly prior to working in football, but especially prior to getting the job up in Hartlepool, like for so many people, football can be a real release, a real outlet. I'm not especially loud or vivacious often, but when I'm inside the stadium, I'm a typical football fan.
Yeah, I think I'm the same. I'm a fairly quiet person. Quite mind get around the ground, and obviously all like in good nature and respectful, particularly for the experiences I've had now from working in football and getting to know footballers and the experience they have, and just seeing some of the problems in grassroots football with supporters on the sidelines and right down into youth football. So I am very conscious that but often the one for me is, people joke about saying ref, like when just when you're appealing for a decision, like I'm often quite quiet, but you get me at the ground and get me involved at sport.
It's
just
different, isn't it? Yeah.
And I wonder if, again, don't want to put words in your mouth or jump into, but we'll probably experience maybe a similar thing now. Now we work in football.
Yes.
Trying to make sure you get that balance right of you can still go to a game sometimes and it be a release.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, without a doubt. And it's very much a balancing act, working for the club that or working with the club that you love is an incredible honour. It's an absolute dream. I remember walking into my first press conference, and we do the press conferences at the end of the training.
Yeah.
So you walk in, and Kevin Phillips was the manager at the time, and fantastic man. I can't speak highly enough of him. And he's right there before you, and suddenly all these players that have been your heroes up until suddenly now you have to try and form a different kind of relationship on a more personal level.
Yeah.
And of course, what you realise pretty quickly is that these guys are all people just like you and I. So that's been absolutely incredible. Getting to know some of the players, all the players at Hartlepool, I've been really lucky, have been fantastic. I think where I wasn't quite so lucky is my first game was a 0-0 draw against Southend, which was a little bit of a dull one. It was actually meant to be a long trip to Maidenhead, so quite local to here. I'd got about half the way there and it was called off. Okay. Ended up being a 0-0 draw with Southend, but my next game, they played local rivals Gateshead. And I remember being in the press box, and at that time I was still sort of finding that balance between professionalism and fan, and Hartlepool were getting battered. But we, against the run of play, opened the scoring, and I wouldn't say I was smug, but there was quite a few press and officials from Gateshead who were incredibly confident before the game.
Yeah.
We'd been on a bit of a bad run. We scored, and I thought, no, it's so different to being a fan on the sidelines, but you can't resist a little fist pump
it's natural.
or something like that. Unfortunately, having done that,
They then
Gateshead went and scored 7. So I was very much a made-to-eat humble pie, and it was a baptism of fire in terms of being a fan and a journalist, because like you said, after the game, we then had to go and
it must be tough
interview the manager. And again, Kevin Phillips, I can't speak highly enough of him, came out and spoke for half an hour, 40 minutes, didn't shy away from anything. You didn't feel there was nothing that was off limits in terms of who you wanted to ask. He would give you his best possible answer. So that was a really interesting learning curve. Thankfully, they did win some games after that, because at one point they were sort of flirting with relegation. And that will be interesting if and when I do experience that. I'm hoping next season I might be able to experience it at the right end of the table. Let's see, ask me again in 6 weeks, and I might be able to give you a clearer answer. But it's definitely an interesting one. But it's a real honour to be able to work and follow the club that you love at the same time.
It's that, we say, like doing something, like probably that excitement of going in. Almost you're one of the first to hear these words, or you are before it goes out to everyone, and you're there on the front line, should we say, and being involved, and it's
thrilling.
It's great, and
it's a real thrill.
And I find, my job, when you break it down to what my actual job is in terms of business support, and I do a lot of operations and this, that, and the other, like you would say, maybe that's not the most exciting, but the fact that I'm doing it, and the networks you're in, and the connections you build, like from being within football and being part of the FA network. We're at Berks and Bucks, we're one of about 50 county FAs, and then we obviously all feed back into the team at Wembley. But just even that, and just seeing how much work goes into football off the pitch and behind the scenes, I had no idea until I took this job. And even now, where we're doing all the affiliations with everyone for the new season, and getting everyone registered, and making sure everyone's got their
incredible
qualifications and the leagues, and making sure the positionings and everything. There's a lot that goes into it, and you just notice how much as well volunteers give. And I'm sure there's probably a few you can think of at Hartlepool, these fans that are there home and away.
I think football is, above all else, it's a community, isn't it? Whether that's an international community, as England, as English people, we've all come together to support the English national team in the last 6 weeks. And in many ways, that gives you that sense of community, whether you're watching it at home with your friends, or whether you're actually out in Germany, or whether you're watching it in a pub or a stadium. You have that community, and it goes right through all the levels, doesn't it? If you're a fan of a big Premier League club, then you might feel you have a bigger community in some ways. But one of the things that I love about, and I'm a bit loath to say Hartlepool is lower league football, I maybe have to start facing the...
more when you think of even, say, like the Thatcher and the Hungerfords, like when you talk proper like non-league
such
football,
an intimate community
it's their like,
it's people's lives.
It is their lives, like, really outside of work. And I can think of volunteers at Didcot, and they're incredible. Like, I mean, I volunteer a little bit myself. I do this, the stats and some of the media stuff, but there's people who are way above and beyond that, and the committee even that keep that club going, really, and it's provides the community. And I think so often goes under the radar.
Without a doubt,
people don't realise, I think, how much sacrifice and how much time goes into people just allowing the club to exist.
Of course, because if you're a supporter, and obviously supporters make a huge amount of sacrifices as well in terms of parting with their money, travel and things, but quite often you look forward to the game all week, and you turn up and support your team on the Saturday.
You think about so much. You think about the management and the players. You don't really think about everyone else. But,
exactly.
But there's a lot that goes into it. And then even, I guess, journalists getting the stories, connecting people. There'll be people who support Hartlepool all over the country. I was going to say all over the world.
There's at least one down south. So.
There's at least one. But and then just making sure that the stories are getting there. And in terms of, I was going to ask you what's next, but I guess you don't really know. Like, Hartlepool is still quite new into the role, and I guess it's
well. I mean, of course the ultimate dream is either that Hartlepool win a series of unlikely promotions and end up in the Premier League, or that things, and I certainly wouldn't want this to happen, but things go wrong and Hartlepool need a new midfield player.
Okay.
So
you can open the batting and you can play in, in the midfield as well.
Well, I say I can play, but
Yeah.
I think I'm a typical supporter in that sense. But like I say, I've only been at Hartlepool for 4 or 5 months, and it's been a massive change. I left my job at Newbury, a job that I loved, with people that I loved, on the Friday, and I moved up on the Saturday, and I started the new role on the Monday.
Oh, right.
So it was a lot, and I wanted to challenge myself, not just in terms of career progression in a sense, because one of the things I wanted to do was be able to specialise in football, and where better place to specialise than the club that you love. That made it easier, certainly, to get started and to pick things up. But I wanted to challenge myself in terms of living in a new place, with new people, away from a lot of friends and family. And it's not all been easy. It's certainly not all been plain sailing. I think it's really important to admit when things are not perfect, and also to admit that that's just a natural part of life and a natural part of progression.
It's a natural part. Yeah, I think it's so true you say that. Like, it could be quite easy maybe for yourself or others in that situation to go, this is the job I wanted, this is a dream role for me, so I'm not going to allow myself to focus on anything that's difficult, because if I tell myself it's difficult, then I tell myself it was the wrong decision, And it's not to say that it was, but there's always going to be challenges. I think it's one of the, a quote, I'm going to butcher it, but something about, if it's comfortable, then it's not, then you're not doing it right, basically. Like, you're only going to, if you want that progression and you want those new challenges, there's going to be difficulties along the way.
Without a doubt.
And like, even like I say, leaving the job that you had at Newbury must have been difficult.
It was actually a really difficult decision. I think one of the things that made it difficult to an extent was the geography. It's a big move. It's probably, on a good day, probably 5.5 hours drive from where I was living to Hartlepool, which is right on the northeast coast. But the people at Newbury made it really difficult to leave, because I loved working there, I loved my colleagues, and I loved all the wonderful people in the sporting community, be that managers, players, racehorse trainers, cricketers, darting sensations, or, like you say, the volunteers or the supporters. I really felt like I'd found a home. And so it was difficult, but one of the things I wanted to do, and you kind of touched on it there, I wanted to step out of my comfort zone again. I wanted to challenge myself, but like you quite rightly say, I think when I went up there, I kind of went up there, I didn't necessarily have too much time to think about what was to come. I was quite, this is the dream. This is Hartlepool United. This is the team I've supported since I was 5 years old, wearing my Hartlepool kit, training with my mates. This is going to be incredible. But of course, inevitably there are challenges. When you see your team lose 7-1 in the second game, there's so much travelling. There's a lot of getting to know new people. There are loads of difficult things, but it's the difficult things that I think help to shape us. And so
the lessons learned, even just in
exactly.
this 4 or 5 months you've been there, I can imagine it's.
I think I've developed a lot as an individual. I think I've developed a lot as a journalist, but also as an individual, and that's something that I'm always mindful of. I love my work. I'm really passionate about my work, but it's super important that you have a life outside work as well, and that you're able to create that balance. And I want to be in a place where I'm happy at work, because that rubs off on the rest of your life, your personal life, your home life.
People around you.
So that's so important. I mean, it's been incredible though, I have to say, all the just like I found in Berkshire with all the wonderful people. Hartlepool, it's different in a lot of regards, but there's still that sense of community, especially when you start to talk to people about the football club, and everyone has something to say, and it's like a brotherhood or sisterhood or whatever. It really bonds you together.
It's funny, it's interesting you mentioned about sometimes, obviously, with the accent, you might go up there and people might think he's just reporting, but then probably as soon as you can reel off some facts and they realise how much you invested in, how much you know about the club, then suddenly they're like, oh, he's one of us.
I think it's an interesting one. I think I've definitely feeling as I've had to prove myself to an extent. The first game...
Do you feel part of that, and again, sorry to interject, do you feel part of that is to do with the Stelling name and the fact that your dad was in the role he was in?
It's such an interesting one, yeah.
Either subconsciously or like more obviously.
Maybe.
Whether either yourself or just from other people once they maybe realise they're like, oh, okay.
Yeah, inevitably working in sports journalism, especially if I was to do, I'm really lucky I get quite a lot of opportunities to do radio now, which I absolutely love, but with Dad, who hasn't been a written journalist for, he won't thank me for saying this, but 40 years or something, it's easier to draw a comparison if I'm doing some sort of spoken form of
so you mean
of media.
People have seen him.
Yes, exactly. So there's always going to be a comparison, but I'm at the start of my career.
Yeah.
He is, and I'm obviously biased, but I would suggest that he's one of the best journalists of his type and has been for 15, 20 years.
Yeah.
So I'm never going to put too much pressure on myself, but I'm always accepting that there might be a comparison. I would always say, though, that there's been far more advantages to disadvantages.
Yes. Yeah.
Because, like we touched on earlier, you get that sort of mentorship. You get to learn from him. He's always just a phone call away, and he's got so much experience. So it's massively a beneficial thing. But definitely, there's a part of that, and I think it's just coming into that new environment and not being a local, as it were. I said the first game was a 0-0 draw with Southend. After about 15 minutes, one of the Southend players went down, and I won't use the same colourful language that the supporter used, but it was something to do with this player is going down because they play for a southern team. With a few colourful words thrown in there.
In the same way I've been at grounds where Wickham would sing about teams from the north.
Yes, yeah.
Jersey Northern, people can fill in the gap.
Exactly. There's always that. Football is very tribal. And I was an outsider coming in, so I think there's definitely been a bit of having to prove myself to an extent. And I'm sure there's loads of people that would say you've got a long way to go, and that's absolutely fine. I think when I did my first radio commentary, I made a mistake of looking afterwards on social media and on the supporters groups, and there were lots of really good comments, but as so many people will say this, it's the one or two bad comments, and you get really hung up on that. The next time I did the radio, I really struggled. I felt there was a real weight on my shoulders because I thought, what happens if this person's listening? And I think that the thing to do is try not to focus on it too much.
And you see, even this is why, that's the extent of doing that generally when you do anything out there. This podcast doesn't have a big enough platform that I would say at the moment for people to really be like commenting or judging it. But even still, whenever you put anything out there, particularly with the nature of this podcast or some of the content I put out on my Cappuccino platform, it's quite vulnerable sometimes. And with it being, I've got better at just, if I'm happy and comfortable with putting it out there, then that's fine. And I think it's, willing to take on feedback if it is feedback, if it's constructive.
That's the tough thing sometimes, isn't it?
That's it, yeah.
Everyone's entitled to an opinion.
But obviously everyone's an expert when you're on social media. A bit like with the amount of people would have said, you get it, everyone's a football manager on their side. And I'm sure I've done it before when I'm watching a game. I go, why has he not brought him on? Why has he not done this? And then, so that's why I think being involved in sport, which is people have quite emotional ties to the club. So it is quite difficult in any role.
Sure.
But no, I feel like close to kind of wrapping up. There's a question I do ask everyone. So I'm going to ask yourself as well. As what does happiness mean to yourself?
Yeah, interesting. Great question. Obviously, happiness is such a unique and personal thing, isn't it? I think for me, I always associate happiness with a sense of freedom, a sense of freedom to live my life within reason, according to my own rules. I think a lot of that starts from a sort of inner freedom, a sense that I am at peace with myself. We've spoken about, the criticism that you might get from certain quarters or whatever, but I think in general, if you can have that sort of sense of self where that you have plenty of good qualities and your good qualities outweigh your bad ones, but of course that we're all imperfect individuals. We all make mistakes. We all say things that we regret. We all make decisions that might not be the right one. But I think accepting that it is really important because it takes a bit of a weight off your shoulders to lead the type of life that you want to live. we're super lucky, I think, to be born in the time and place that we are, because we have so many freedoms. And I think it's always important to be mindful of that and to use that freedom to enjoy life, but also to try and leave a mark in a positive way. You know, it sounds so sort of sickly, but being nice to your peers and things like that. It's such an important thing, and it can, I think, help our inner selves, and it obviously has a massive impact on our friends and family. I think friends and family, I'm sure lots of people will touch on friends and family as well as being the key to happiness. I think certainly having been up in the northeast, making lots of new friends, but you're always mindful of the fact that your friends and family are a little bit of a distance away. That sort of brings into focus how important that is.
I think so, that and realising when they're not just, you can't just hop in the car and drive around and see someone.
Exactly.
It takes away, maybe, it doesn't take away the connection, but it takes away that physical.
It does, in some ways, though, makes it more special the times that you have together. I think you certainly cherish that. I mean, another thing I've always tried to live by is I can be a little bit uptight sometimes. So I always try not to take myself too seriously. I think sometimes we have a bad day or something happens to us that we wouldn't necessarily have liked. Often these things that might seem like the end of the world if we're tired or if we're emotional, in 2 weeks we might forget that they've even happened.
I think that's perspective as well, isn't it? I think one of my colleagues, he's got a lot more life experience, shall we say?
Yeah.
He'll appreciate me saying it in that way rather than. He's been around the.
Very diplomatic.
A lot more life experience, and
he's really old.
He's pretty much. But I remember shortly after I joined the team, and I was getting a bit similar. I was new. You feel like you're trying to prove yourself a little bit, or working in football, even in the administrative side, or with working with people on committees and stuff like. It can get emotive, if people don't get a result they like, or if people don't get a decision they like, sometimes it can feel personal. Yeah. And I think he said something great, which was just think if you're not going to worry about it in 3 weeks' time, don't worry about it now. Yeah. And that was just such good advice. Like if you're not going to be thinking about it then, don't worry about it now. And so that's something that stuck with me, because I'm definitely can be a bit of an overthinker, and I sit on things and I really worry about them. Oh yeah. Just that, think less, do more as well. Something he said to me. Because he could see that I was like, will I fire this email off? Will I not? He was just like, Hans, just think less, do more. And just do it. And
it's really interesting that you say that, because I'm a bit of an overthinker as well. Even with the email thing, I can certainly relate to that.
Maybe for you, if you're publishing something as a journalist, you're like, once this goes live, it's
it's live. It's funny. I often will find myself, or certainly I have in the past. I'll read things over 3 or 4 times. Especially when I was working in Newbury, I had about an hour commute, so there was a lot of time to mull things over. You can think,
sometimes
is this too much time? Well, you think, is this sentence better than this one, or is this one better? I often find that the first thing that comes to mind, it's not necessarily the case for everything or for everyone. I often find the first thing is the most natural, and often, therefore, the best or the truest reflection of myself as a writer and a journalist. So I think
almost trying not to audit yourself too much.
Yeah, without a doubt.
Because I guess as part of it, you want to get your personality out there as well. It's part of
completely
why some of the best journalists probably do get out there. It's, they're relaying the information really well, but it's people enjoy reading it as well.
I always think that the best journalists, the best authors. I'm a massive reader. Whatever kind of whether it's sports journalism or whether it's War and Peace, I'm a massive. I think the best writers always have that little hint of the individual in their work. Quite often, if you can read their writing and you don't know who it is, you think, oh, I think this might be this person. I think that's certainly the type of writer that I want to be. And I said at the start of the question, I said just giving yourself that freedom
to be yourself,
freedom to be yourself. Freedom to express yourself, freedom to feel a certain type of way as well is massive.
Yeah, that self-confidence in a way of your value, who you are, doesn't depend on it, how other people see it.
For sure.
As you said, within reason, as long as it's being respectful and not upsetting anyone else. But no, amazing. Cheers, Robbie.
Well, thanks so much for having me.
No, it's been great. I feel like I could just keep we could keep rolling and rolling.
We certainly could. It's been a real pleasure to to come on, and I'm a big fan, and I really appreciate the work that you're doing. It's so important that we can have these conversations, and I think it's really nice to do it in a sort of relaxed atmosphere, just a friendly conversation.
Yeah,
because
that's what it is. It's funny, you're not the first person who's come on as like, or beforehand, what kind of questions might there be today? And I said it is, and you can probably attest to it, there's that one question I like to ask everyone, what has happiness mean to you? Because I think it is really interesting. It's a unique thing to everyone. And there are themes often. Probably the most common one has been that peace of mind, which I think is something you touched on as well about that theme.
For sure.
And that probably is for me. If I'm, just that at peace is probably happiness. But enjoy it. And didn't know where the conversation was going to go, but that's often the best conversation.
Yeah, it's been great. We've covered plenty of ground, I think. So,
yeah, definitely. And look forward to hopefully catching a game with you sometime. Maybe when you're back down this way, or if ever I'm up Hartlepool way. I'm not sure what would lead me there, but
you never know. Jungle of the Northeast, as we say, but I'm always trying to get back down.
My sister does live in Newcastle at the moment.
Fantastic. Well, Newcastle.
I don't know how far that is from Hartlepool.
It's only about 40 minutes actually, and Newcastle's a beautiful city. There's some wonderful places up there. Durham as well is a fantastic place.
So maybe if ever I'm visiting my sister up in Newcastle,
please do give me a shout. And like I say, I'll be back down south. Hopefully, going to be able to take in a game from Hungerford, Thatcham, Newbury, all the teams that gave me Didcot, of course. All the teams that gave me so much. You know, I certainly would like to come back and support them. They're all my second team.
Thatcham are in Didcot's league this year, so maybe we'll have to have a look.
Well, there you go. Let's look out for it.
The only one that's not about 50 miles away.
Yeah, that'll be fantastic. I look forward to that.
No, perfect. Cheers, Robbie.
Thanks very much.
Yeah. See you soon.
Brilliant.
Thank you so much for tuning in to this latest episode of Flat Whites and Insights, and I really hope you gained something from that conversation, because I know I certainly did. It would mean a lot if you can like or subscribe on whatever platform you may be watching or listening on, and please do share this podcast with any friends or family or anyone you know that you think might benefit from having a listen. Also, if you can head over to Instagram and give Cappuccino a follow, that's where you'll find the latest updates as we look to raise awareness of mental health through my passions for football and coffee. And I'm always open to people getting in touch if you want to have a conversation, collaborate, or even come on the podcast yourself. The support means a lot, and I'm very grateful. Thanks so much again, and I hope to see you soon.